When you need to focus on building, do you want to get bogged down by your database? MongoDB is an intuitive, flexible document database that lets you get to building. MongoDB's document model is a natural way to represent data so you can focus on what matters. MongoDB Atlas is the best way to use MongoDB. It's a global cloud database service that gives you all of the developer productivity of MongoDB, plus the added simplicity of a fully managed database service. You can get started free with MongoDB Atlas at mongodb.com/atlas. This is Scott Hansel, and this is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm talking with Huma Abidi. She's a Senior Director of AI Software Products at Intel Corporation. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for inviting me, Scott.
Yeah, I'm happy to chat with you. I've done a bunch of research to learn about you and find out where you were coming from and how you ended up where you are. And I found a couple of articles, and one said that you actually set out to become a doctor. Is that true?
That is true, yes. My bachelor's is in pre-med in chemistry. And then I met my husband who was doing computer science, so that my husband now. So I really got interested in computer science, and then I ended up doing master's in computer science. And so that kind of changed the directions. Even though now we're using AI for so many, health-related things, so I kind of like to connect the dots, but I am a computer scientist now.
That's amazing. So is that a common pivot? I seem like I've heard people before thinking about working on software like people, and then they end up working on software like computers.
Yeah. In fact, I was listening to the podcast that you had. I believe it's Dr. William Springer, who said that he wrote a book called Programming for Computer Science. Scientists, and that's something that I really love, that anybody can, you can come from different fields, but then you can be a computer scientist, and that is something that, especially for AI, which is very interdisciplinary. So I feel that whatever your domain is, whatever your area is, computer science and AI, those things can be applied.
One of the things that I've also noticed is I've read a number of articles about you with a number of other women in Intel that it seems like you feel like AI and women in tech is like two things that go together really, really well. You're passionate about women being excited about artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that I think that one of the key things that I want to do is to attract women, and my entire career I've tried to do that, to be striving to be a role model. And whenever I get an opportunity, I go and talk about my career in general in tech and all. But specifically for AI, I think it's much easier now. We can basically show girls and young women that how AI is relevant to the world, and how they can be part of creating this exciting, impactful solutions. And they can actually see how exciting it is, like they are using Alexa or self-driving car or recommendation that they get from Netflix. So connecting those things with what they're doing and what they can be doing is a great way of attracting them. The other thing that I think that I just mentioned, that is striving to be a role model, I feel like that representation is very, very important. And I myself have several role models and for human-centered AI, like Fei-Fei Li in Stanford, or Meredith Whittaker in NYU. So that we have many, many great examples of women who are leading, major efforts and consortiums in AI. So that's one way that I feel like more and more women are getting into it. And also I just mentioned about the AI being extremely interdisciplinary. So you could be doing something different, but then you can be part of AI solution or apply AI to whatever you are doing.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, as we want to make sure that everyone is included and that folks with all different backgrounds, all different genders, all different socioeconomic backgrounds are included in software. We don't want to be stereotypical or make generalizations, but at the same time, I wonder if there are positive don't know, positive characteristics rather than saying stereotypes, where women are really helping accelerate AI, and because they're bringing a focus on solving real problems, or a focus on being very organized. I wonder if there are things that are unique about women that allow AIs to be created that are more thoughtful and more inclusive.
Yeah, I mean that you can apply to anything. I wouldn't specific say just for AI in computer
Hmm.
science or whatever. In my role as a manager, I mean, diversity has been a key, and myself being, a female manager. So I have seen several qualities or things that women are very good at, and that you can apply whether it's in AI or it is in management or wherever. So AI, I would say it's interesting to women is because two things I would say. One is that AI for social good. I have felt whenever I bring this topic up, I'll
Hmm.
say, that we have this project, AI for social good. I somehow feel that women get really passionate about it, even more so than this is as my own personal experience, and maybe not, I shouldn't generalize, but I feel
Hmm.
like they really are passionate about, okay, this is a project, I would love to work on it because this is going to change the world and for my children or whatever. So that is something that I feel that, we have a big need, and this is a very, very important part. And biases, that's inclusiveness, that not just women, but everybody should be included. So that also where women play a role, but specifically for AI for social good and projects such as these are really where women can shine.
Hmm.
And the third point I would like to make is, as I said, that you could be doing economics or education or literature or whatever you are doing. Now, AI, all of these aspects or these fields are becoming important to an overall AI. So, if they were not doing a majority of women or a lot of women who were not into STEM, they can still be part of AI because they can apply AI to whatever domain that they are working in.
Interesting. And there's certainly many well-known women leaders in AI that serve as role models, yourself included.
Thank
Fei
you.
Fei Li, from who's doing human-centered AI at Stanford,
Hmm.
Meredith Whittaker. These are all folks that are thinking about the social implications of AI.
Exactly.
It seems that that all the different companies that are leading the charge, Intel included, have been
Hmm.
coming up with kind of guidelines for human-centered AI and trying to remove the creepiness factor.
Hmm. Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, the whole goal of human-centered AI is to, to for betterment of humanity, and through AI. So improve human conditions and also enhance what humans can do. It's always said, and in some cases it's true that AI is replacing humans, but the idea of human-centered AI would be to improve the quality of life of every human, but with ethics in the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
So having that, I think I'm really passionate about this, and I've started a engagement with human-centered AI at Stanford, which is co-founded by Fei Fei Li, and we are trying to do where we can work. Intel can work with high. That's what they call it. It's a human-centered AI,
Mm-hmm.
and in some several solutions for the pandemic and COVID-19, and we are trying to get together and see how we can help in that.
What do you think about the public, the lay person's, the non technical person's relationship with AI? Because you used the example that there's opportunities for AI to improve how humans do something, but then there's also how we as humans feel about it. A good example that I heard recently was like, if I go into a store and I don't want anyone to shoplift, there's
Mm-hmm.
cameras, right? My whole life,
Mm-hmm.
there's been cameras in the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
And I always assumed that there was a person with a uniform in the back room somewhere with a bunch of computers
Mm-hmm.
looking at the screens. And if they see me try to take something, then they'll come and they'll say, "Hey, don't take that."
Mm-hmm.
But you could solve that. You could look at 100 cameras, or you could
Mm-hmm.
do the entire casino floor
Mm-hmm.
and looking for cheating. But for some reason, I think the lay person, at least today in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
feels that I trust a human to do that, but I'm concerned if a computer is quote unquote spying on me. How do we change the lay person's relationship to AI that they aren't finding that is a scenario that makes them concerned? There's so much concern around cameras and AI today.
That's a very good point that you're making, and I think in some cases the concern is legitimate because, I mean, I am also a believer that whether it's government or someone who shouldn't be recording everything, wherever I go, what I do. But let's keep that aside for a bit.
Hmm.
So I'll give you an example where we are using exactly the same technique, and I would call it AI for social good, where there we had a collaboration with Leonardo DiCaprio's organization, where we are trying to eliminate poaching. And so we could use that camera, and the algorithm is such that it catches only if it meets that certain criteria, and then the information is sent to the rancher or whoever, and then they can come and fix it. So if the machine is using it, but then it only sends specific things where they see an issue, and that's where it does where it sends it, and that's where it's used. If people realize that they're not recording their every action, and in fact the purpose of this is to only catch issues, then I think they will be more convinced, rather than thinking that somebody is recording me and then
Mm.
doing what with this. So it's how you use AI. I think that could be a way of explaining that it is much more effective, and it's better than a human being sitting and checking it out. Whereas I agree that there's a recording, but then it's being used for a specific purpose. That's what AI is good at, right? AI
Hmm.
does not have the general intelligence. It's one task and only one task. And if that task is to catch somebody stealing, then that's what it would be good at.
That's a really good answer. That's really thoughtful. It also makes me think, and if we refer back to that example that you gave about protecting animals that you all did with the National Geographic Society,
Hmm.
that trail, it was called Trail Guard AI,
Yes,
and that
yes,
used the
exactly.
the Intel Movidius.
Yes.
Yeah. So those vision processing units are like system on a chips that have that neural network local. Do you think
Exactly.
that the concern that people have about AI is that they feel that their images or their information is being transported somewhere, and if they could understand that this work can happen locally and that the processing is local, that
Hmm.
increases their trust, right? The
Exactly.
idea that Alexa is not always listening, it's just listening for the word Alexa.
That's right. That's you gave the answer. Yes, exactly right. I mean, sometimes you do need the processing to happen in the cloud,
Of
so
course.
things get transferred. But as you said, Movidius, you was using OpenVINO, TrailGuard. You seem to know a lot about all of these, so that's
Well, I try
great.
to do my research, but when I
Yeah,
have an important guest.
apparently you did very well. Thank you.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, something like that is really interesting to point out because the Movidius is like the size of a pencil. It's like a little tiny thing.
Hmm.
It's impossibly small. So you can hide it from the poachers and the
That's
animals.
right. That's right. That's one of our great examples. Yes.
Wow. Okay. So those are the kinds of things that can enable drones or robots
Yes.
or scenarios where I think people thought that you would need a giant superpowered computer to do this work, and now it
Hmm.
can be something that fits in your pocket.
That's right. That's right.
So does that mean that we'll see like just casual ML? I mean, I think we're already seeing it on our phones and on our small portable devices. If they're going to be as tiny as something that can fit in my pocket, then there's no reason that AI and neural network algorithms won't be everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I will talk about the portfolio that we have in Intel. So we
Hmm.
have, we do have data center, we have CPU, we have GPUs, and then we have things on the edge and device. So now this depends
Mm.
on what your requirement is. What is more important to you? If compute or it's power that you're looking for, performance, latency, cost, resilience. So depending on that, you would have that. So, but to answer your question, yes, certainly, it's getting more and more for edge. It's becoming cheaper. It's becoming faster, and more devices are coming. Software, which is my focus. So we are making sure that software works on each of these form factors.
Yeah, that's a good point because your group focuses on that software improvement on the hardware that either exists or the hardware of the future. For
Hmm.
example, if you have Xeon processors, what can we do to make those work better with things like TensorFlow?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So, how
So.
does that work? Because TensorFlow is
Hmm.
an open source project
Hmm.
and it works however it works from my perspective as a user.
Hmm.
Does Intel join the project? How do you interact
Yep.
with them to make sure that an Intel accelerated experience is improved when someone is using something like a TensorFlow?
So as you know, Scott, that software plays a very critical role in getting our AI workloads best performance out of hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what we do on our side, working together with the hardware architects of CPUs, we make sure that on the software side, we are enabling the features, the instruction sets. And when there is a new instruction set, for example, VNNI, DL Boost is added, then we want to make sure that the software on our side also gets the maximum roofline or close to whatever the hardware is offering. So in order to do that, we will collaborate with our partners on the hardware side, hardware architects. And then one of the key things that we specifically for framework optimizations, you had asked about TensorFlow. What we do is we use the library that we have, the 1DNN library, which we integrate to these frameworks, whether it's TensorFlow, PyTorch, or MXNet, working together with Google or with Facebook or AWS to make sure that this when this library, that Intel's deep learning new network library, is integrated, then all of the most popular operators such as convolution, batch norm, or gem is replaced by the DNN library. So that's how we integrated the operators that TensorFlow has. Those operators will now be replaced by the 1DNN operators, and that will give the maximum performance. It will get better vectorization, parallelism, which is because it's based on the x86 architecture.
Interesting. Today's episode of Hansel Minutes is sponsored by Datadog, a monitoring and analytics platform for cloud scale infrastructure and applications. Datadog provides dashboarding, alerting, application performance monitoring, and log management in one tightly integrated platform, so you can get end-to-end visibility quickly. Be proactive with your monitoring strategy and catch issues before your clients are impacted. Start managing the overall health of your environment with a free Datadog trial. Visit datadoghq.com/Hanselminutes to get started. Okay, so I want to actually ask a question and forgive my ignorance, because I was thinking if you're writing something in Python, it's a very high level language. It eventually goes and it calls, some extern C library, and now it's in C. And then that C, depending on what compiler it was run through, and depending on who wrote that C compiler, it picks the instruction set that it feels is appropriate. But Intel has a whole family of these instruction sets. You're making that native library and providing that native library as a
Exactly.
plugin.
Exactly. So
Ah.
whenever it invokes, when it sees it's a CPU, then it would say, okay, let's use this. So it's an eigen versus 1DNN.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be called MKLDNN library. Now we call it 1DNN. So it would do that. So we work very, very closely with the, say, let's use PyTorch or TensorFlow as example. We
Mm-hmm.
have weekly meetings with them, and then we will go through these are the things that we are making. Besides just 1DNN, there are many other optimizations we do, whether it's graph fusion or constant folding or memory or thread management. We have to review it with them. We have a PR that we submit, and then we will work with them, and they will say, okay, this makes sense, and this will make sure the TensorFlow optimization would be even better for CPU, and it does not impact negatively to any other platform. So this is sorry.
No, I just want to make sure that for folks who are not understanding some of the acronyms, DNN is deep neural network, correct?
Yes,
And then
sorry.
that term that you were using, eigen, maybe you could just briefly mention that.
Yeah, so that is the equivalent operators that TensorFlow uses.
Mm-hmm.
So what our goal is to make sure that we even help optimize eigen that TensorFlow is using, and then our goal is to make sure that if there are operators that we have in our 1DNN, then instead of eigen, we would be using the our library, Intel's library, to get
Right.
better performance.
Okay. And then eigen is a high level library for linear algebra and vectors and things like that. And that
Yeah,
I assume that eigen is in the context of eigenvalues and eigenvectors and math
that's
things
right.
like that. So
For
you're
TensorFlow.
really making it so some software that people are already using, like TensorFlow, just
Mhm.
lights up if they have that processor, if they have that instruction set and they swap it out, their experience gets better. And like you said, 2x better, order of magnitude better, depending on what they're doing.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. With each new scalable generation, excuse me, Xeon scalable processor that we have, we introduce new instructions, and we give orders of magnitude performance better each time.
Wow, that's really interesting. And it also showcases for maybe for people who are listening who are software people and don't really think about the hardware that it reminds me of the 486, honestly, because
Mhm.
when we had a 486 SX, it didn't have a coprocessor. And then we got the coprocessor and then things started lighting up. And that was the first time in my experience where I had an Intel chip and then I got another one and things
Mhm.
I was doing regularly just got better
Mhm.
because work that was effectively emulated in software moved down, I guess, down in the responsibility tree and just got better. So like you're doing work that they would have had to have done in software.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's
So it's
amazing.
a, yeah.
And they welcome that. This is a relationship, just like any vendor working with open source. And how do you upstream that in coordination with these different projects?
Yeah. So that's one of the key learnings that we had, that we have our own GitHub and we have our own branch, but once you upstream it, that's the way to do it, right? The most we will get a lot of people who also contribute to it. We get issues, bugs that we resolve ASAP, and then we also get a lot of people contributing to it. So once you become part of the main line, or any tool that we have, we are also sort of focusing on out of box, and we
Mm-hmm.
are trying to have our own, whether it's a quantization tool or whatever tool we write. We have realized that making it open source, I mean, everybody knows this these days, but
Mm-hmm.
making it open source is the way to go, because there are so many people who are using it, who are contributing to it, and they are finding issues for us.
How is that relation? How has that experience been at Intel? Because I worked at Intel many, many, many years ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was I worked in Santa Clara, and it was a big giant company and it moved kind of slow. But the new Intel seems like, there's the Intel Simplified Software Alliance license and there's very liberal redistribution and things that used to be sold for customers are now available. Has that been a thing that happened quickly in your experience, or have you been slowly selling management on the power of open source?
I would say it's a little slower than I would have liked it to be, but myself being in this AI area, we have we have, I wouldn't say no choice, I mean it's very welcome, but we have to go with open source. So if
Mm.
we want to contribute to anything, I mean AI, it has been such a wonderful thing that people, all the papers are being shared on archive, everything is open source. So if you want to participate or be part of AI, then you have to be open source. So if we are writing tools, if we are doing anything, it doesn't make sense to be proprietary. You want it to be used for everybody. And so I think this is in a very positive direction. But there are things like, if you want to use a label data set, you want to make sure they're clean, they are legal, and so those are the areas that when we want to make it open source, we have to go through a bunch of hoops, and want to make sure that there's no bias, there's representation. And so I think we have an open source PTT where we want to make sure that we review everything properly. If you are making something open source, you have much more strict guidelines, and so we need to follow that.
What is that term, PGT?
Oh, PTT. It's a performance team, performance
Performance group, maybe? Oh,
decision team.
decision
So
team,
I'm
PGT.
sorry.
No,
We
it's the
use
same
that
thing at
so much.
Microsoft. I have all these three-letter acronyms, you want to expand those as much as you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. I just say it without even realizing it.
Of
That
course, of course.
that it's an open source where the decision is made that this is approved or not approved. If you want to open source something, or if you want to share some performance data, then you have to go through that and get all the approvals done that this is legal. And as I was mentioning, that if you are using some data set, then you want to make sure the data set is clean and it's labeled and it's bias free, etc.
Yeah, and folks can go and check out the open source technology site from Intel and see all the different open source tools that Intel is involved in. I mean, it's really a lot and a lot of cool stuff that's happened just in the last, I would say, 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going forward, do you see these kinds of light ups around AI and ML being moved out of the server and into desktop processors? Is that a thing that I, as an owner of an Intel desktop, would even think about, or is this primarily cloud based?
So my focus is mostly on cloud based. That's
Hmm.
why, as I did say, that we have a portfolio about both hardware and software
Mm.
for everything. So I'm more focused on the cloud side. But
Hmm.
definitely, I mean, there is we have the client side where we are already engaging with them, and we are making sure from a software perspective that our that TensorFlow, for example, is highly optimized working on desktop. So absolutely, you're absolutely right that we are. It's going to be everywhere,
Mm.
but my focus being on the CPU side, I can definitely answer that there is a lot going on that side.
Hmm.
And also besides, so I'm just rethinking the answer, that software portfolio that we have is whether it's CPU or it's desktop, or it's, I mean, whether it's cloud or desktop or edge.
Hmm.
From our software perspective, we want to make sure that we have the rights, for example, right set of libraries
Mm.
for library developers, or whether it's a Python, Intel distribution of Python, or analytics, or 1DNN. Then for data scientists, for example, we have the optimization of TensorFlow, MXNet. And then if we are application developers, we have our model zoo, where we put all kinds of pre-trained models or precision low precision tools.
Hmm.
So our job is my job is to make sure that this whole software portfolio that we have works on each of the hardware that's being offered. So though I'm more focused on CPU and Xeon, we want to make sure that OpenVINO that we have, or other software that we have, is working on edge or desktop or wherever, depending on, as I mentioned earlier, that what is more important, if it's compute or latency or cost.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. I've downloaded the Intel distribution for Python as well as the Parallel Studio XE, and
Hmm.
been using and playing a little bit actually with the Windows subsystem for Linux, which is a thing that I'm very passionate about. The idea that I can run the Linux distribution of TensorFlow on Windows on my Intel desktop, and then when I feel like I want to move my maybe lightly trained models into the cloud and have them more rigorously trained by a cloud system and a Xeon processor, then I have a good experience. So I appreciate that you're scaling from tiny devices the size of a pencil all the way up into the
Hmm.
cloud and everything
Yeah,
in between.
that's right. Yeah.
And actually, before we go, one of the things that was sent over to me that I wanted to mention because I thought it was really extraordinary was this thing called neural style transfer. This is artwork, but you're painting your own paintings and then also including your technology to make even cooler paintings. Can you tell me what that is?
Yes, yes. So painting is something I love to do, and lately, since we've been in the shelter in place, I've had some more time, and I have been doing more paintings. And one of my very favorite nonprofits, it's called Give Light Foundation. So they auctioned a couple of my paintings. I mean, and people actually paid money, not a whole lot, but they paid some money. So that got me going, and I created even more. But besides painting, once you finish painting, you want to improve it, or you wonder what it would be if I changed the color, or if I did this. So I had read about neural style transfer sometime last year. And so what I did was, and basically what neural style transfer is, you take an original painting image and a style image, both of them as an input. And then output is a final image which is similar to both the original painting content wise and style wise, the second painting. So basically, what we are doing is we are using a VGG19, a popular neural based a model, DNN, deep neural network model. And so we're running it using TensorFlow and using our Intel Xeon processor. So in addition to that, we had a lot of fun engineering my team. So we did hyperparameter tuning to put more weight on the similarity to original content, and we came up with so many different variations of that, and providing more and more visual appealing images. So this is one of the examples that I'm combining, something I love to do with the work that I have. And in fact, we have a quantization tool called iLit, and we are using it to further optimize it. So I even found some bugs. So this is really an example of combining your passion with your work, and coming up with something which is good.
It's hard to describe this when we're thinking about the fact that we're on a podcast, but I'll try to include links in the show notes so that folks can go and see this wherever you've posted them. But what's interesting about it is the way that you've presented, at least in the slide deck that I have, is you've got your original painting, which might be in a number of styles. You have one that here is like a cab on a quiet street in New York, and it's very blues and a lot of vertical strokes, kind of showing the height of the New York skyline. And then if you add that with like Starry Night, then you get kind of an interesting mashup. But then when things get really interesting was when you don't combine two paintings, you combine like the surface of an Intel chip, and you get this amazing, like it looks like a human did this, but only half of a human did that.
That's right. That's right.
It's really extraordinary, and it's a very clever thing, this neural style transfer, because you're taking your style and then another artist's style or a physical object, and when you combine them, I don't know if I would argue if it's better. It's just different, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on what you like, but I'm very happy with the results, because I'm only showing a couple to you, right?
Sure.
But in the process, it's amazing. You can change the weight of one to other, and then you can see more of the style or more of the content. So I spend like hours and hours at night just thinking like what would be better, and I have to print those out and think. But this is a new hobby for me.
That's a wonderful hobby, and I appreciate you sharing it with me and for coming on the show.
Thank you, Scott.
We've been talking with Huma Abidi, and this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes. We'll see you again next week.